But good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you, and I get to bring you the message for today, and kind of an unusual story about Jesus, which is always a fun thing to reflect a little bit upon. And so I found an article titled "The Day I'll Never Forget." Now, it was an interview with prominent people about where they were and what they remember from some of the most momentous events in American history. Janice Aldrin recalled the giant rocket-shaped cake her and her family and friends ate to celebrate the day when her dad, Buzz Aldrin, first set foot on the moon. Former Olympic track star Madeline Manning Mims remembered the terror she and her teammates felt at the 1972 Olympics in Munich when terrorists invaded the Olympic Village and killed a number of Israeli athletes. And Yolanda King, daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., remembered that terrible day when her father was assassinated. As a little girl, she tried to deny that her father was really dead, and she never really faced her emotions and memories of that day until she became an adult. Some events in our lives leave an indelible impression. Now, I could ask many of you where you were and what you were doing when President John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And you would be able to tell me with some detail exactly where you were and what you were doing. One man I know of told me the story of that day. He was in surgery that day, and as he came out from under this cloud of anesthesia, he heard the doctors and nurses in the recovering room asking, "Is he still alive?" He didn't know they were talking about the president at that point. He thought they were talking about him. He said he tried desperately to wiggle a little finger so they would realize that he was still with them. And he said he'll never forget that day for a number of reasons. But some events just leave this indelible impression. We never forget them. Well, at the end of today's lesson from the Gospel of Luke, Luke tells us that Jesus' mother Mary treasured all these things in her heart. Okay, that's an interesting phrase. Wouldn't you love to be like a television reporter and have an interview with Mary, the mother of Jesus, a little bit later in life? What were those things that she treasured in her heart? Which events stand out? How about the wedding at Cana in Galilee when Jesus turned all that water into wine? That might be one. Certainly his crucifixion and his resurrection would be another one. But surely one of the events that she would recall in that interview would be the episode in today's lesson, when their family visited the temple when Jesus was 12 years old. Now, when they finally found Jesus, this was his response to them. "Well, why were you searching for me?" He asked rather cryptically. "Didn't you know that I would be in my Father's house?" Now, it wasn't a belligerent answer, and it wasn't taken that way. They had great faith in their son, Mary and Joseph did. They didn't understand him sometimes, but they trusted him. Does that sound familiar to anyone in this room? This is a great story. It's a great story. It's no wonder that Mary treasured it in her heart. Because you see, in this lesson, we get a glimpse of the family life in the home of Mary and Joseph and Jesus. We know from this story that they were devout people who followed the dictates of their faith. We also know that they trusted Jesus. He was a responsible kid. The fact that they could begin their pilgrimage back home without checking on his whereabouts is proof of that. They trusted him. And we know that they handled conflict well. This is the key. They handled conflict well. Mary expressed her concern about his disappearing act, but there was no temper tantrum. There was no overreaction, right? Could you say the same about your family? It's an important question, isn't it? It's an important question. We know that families handle conflict differently, right? Some handle conflict better than others. Stephen Glenn tells a wonderful story about a famous research scientist who made several very important medical breakthroughs. It's a great story. A newspaper reporter interviewed this scientist and asked him why, in his opinion, he was so much more creative than the average person. The scientist answered that he believed it was because of an experience he had with his mother when he was about 2 years old. He had been trying to get a bottle of milk out of the refrigerator when he lost his grip on it, spilling its contents all over the kitchen floor. It created a sea of milk. When his mother came into the kitchen, instead of yelling at him, giving him a lecture, or punishing him, she said, "Robert, what a great and wonderful mess you have made. I have rarely seen such a huge puddle of milk. Well, the damage has been done. Would you like to play in the milk for a few minutes before we clean it up?" Robert thought that was a great idea. After a few minutes, his mother said, "You know, Robert, when you make a mess like this, eventually you have to clean it up. So how would you like to do that? Would you rather use a sponge, a towel, or a mop?" He chose the sponge, and together they cleaned up the mess. His mother then said, "You know, what we have here is a failed experiment in how to effectively carry a big milk bottle with 2 little hands. Let's go out to the backyard and fill the bottle up with water. Then we'll see if you can figure out how to carry it without dropping it." The little boy learned that if he grasped the bottle at the top with both of his little hands, he could carry it without dropping it. It was a wonderful life lesson. This renowned scientist then remarked that at that moment, he knew he didn't need to be afraid of making mistakes. Instead, he learned that mistakes were just opportunities for learning something new, which is, after all, what scientific experiments are all about, right? Even if the experiment doesn't work, we usually learn something valuable from it. Wow. Now, I won't ask how many of you moms and dads would have that kind of patience that this mother had, but it's a great, great story. How do you handle conflict in your family? How do you handle mistakes? How do you handle disobedience or rudeness? Do we understand that you're modeling behavior for your children? Now, you can teach them about responsible behavior until you're blue in the face, but the truth is that they are much more likely to emulate you and your actions than to do what you say. Oh, yeah, I know, kids can drive you nuts sometimes, right? They can drive you crazy. I read a great story about a kindergarten teacher who was helping one of her students put his boots on. He asked for help, and she could see why. With her pulling and him pushing, the boots still didn't want to go on. By the time the second boot was on, she had worked up a sweat. She almost whimpered when the boy said, "Teacher, they're on the wrong feet." Well, she looked, and sure enough, they were on the wrong feet. Well, it wasn't easier pulling the boots off than it was putting them on. She managed to keep her cool as together they worked to get the boots back on, this time on the right feet. He then announced, "These aren't my boots." She bit her tongue rather than get right in his face and scream, "Why didn't you say so?" like she wanted to. Once again, she struggled to help him pull the ill-fitting boots off. He then said, "They're my brother's boots. My mom made me wear them today." Well, she didn't know if she should laugh or cry. She mustered up the grace to wrestle the boots back on his feet again. And then she said, "Now, where are your mittens?" And he said, "I stuffed them in my boots." Isn't that a great story? Kids can drive you crazy, right? They really can. They can drive you nuts. But parents can drive kids crazy too. I'm certain kids get confused about the parent who can be so loving at times and at other times get so grouchy and short-tempered. Kids don't understand about stress, I know. They do understand, however, that parents' response can be out of proportion to a child's misdeed. We can learn from our children sometimes. The wife of an Adventist pastor was writing about their family life. And she said that their family lives in apartments most of the year because they move from city to city holding these evangelistic meetings. One evening, after meeting, she and her daughter took all of the dirty clothes out of their temporary apartment home to a laundromat. They closed the door on a naked apartment. The beds were stripped, the towels were taken down, their clothes supply was exhausted. Everything went to the triple-load washer at the Perky Clean laundromat. His wife and mother, this wife and mother didn't feel very perky, though, at 11 p.m., but she knew the job had to be done. Suddenly, the washing machine stopped. The attendant called the manager. When he arrived, he said she'd have to come back in the morning. They were sending her home with no sheets to sleep on, no towels to dry with, and no clean clothes to put on. She confessed that she was steamed. Until Beth, her daughter, exclaimed, "Oh, Mom, being a pastor's family is so exciting. Isn't this fun?" As her daughter giggled with spontaneous glee, she saw that she really meant it. And this exhausted mother began to laugh with her. There wasn't anything else to do, except, of course, to thank God for her wonderful daughter who used her influence to bless her mom at nearly midnight in the Perky Clean laundromat. There are some lessons we can learn from our children. And that's why on one occasion, when Jesus wanted to make a point to his disciples, he put a child in the midst of them. Children learn from their parents, but there are lessons parents can learn from their children as well. Mary and Joseph were devout people. They trusted God, and they also trusted their son Jesus. They handled conflict well in their family. There was a bond of love and a bond of respect. I've seen that in families, a lot of them here at Grace, and it's a beautiful thing to behold. And you know these children are going to turn out just fine. Now, that doesn't mean that these children don't make mistakes. All children make mistakes. But the mistakes are kept in perspective. No one throws a tantrum. No one gets out of control. Each problem is handled with love and mutual respect. You know, one of the most appropriate movies for this season of the year is simply titled A Christmas Story. How many of you watched A Christmas Story this year? I see any hands out there? Okay, very good. Yeah, good. That's a great movie. Well, it tells the story of Ralphie, a young boy living in northern Indiana in the late 1940s. In one scene, Ralphie beats up a neighborhood bully, literally just pummeling his foe. Well, Ralphie's mother catches him in the act, and Ralphie expects the worst from his father that evening. At dinner, his father asks about his day. Before he had a chance to reply, his mother responded, "Nothing much, Ralphie had a fight." Father puts down the newspaper and gazed at Ralphie. "A fight? What kind of fight?" Mom jumps in again. "Oh, you know how boys are. I gave him a talking to. Oh, I see the Bears are playing the Packers on Sunday." Distracted by the sports page, the father forgets about the fight. Well, Ralphie turns and beams a smile at his mother for overlooking his bad behavior. And Ralphie says to himself, "I slowly realized that I was not about to be destroyed." From then on, things were different between me and my mother. That happens in families, doesn't it? How you handle mistakes, problems, disappointments, conflict of any kind may have a remarkable impact on how young people in your home handle their lives. Mary and Joseph were devout people. They trusted their son Jesus. They handled conflict well in their family. Did it work? Well, listen to how the story ends. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor. Not bad, huh? Not bad. May each of us do as well with those we love. Thanks for watching. I hope this video can further the discussion of your relationship with Christ, either at home or maybe in the comments below.